Hello everyone, I'm Grimm the Goblin, and today I'm going to be ranking the Legion class order halls. Please keep in mind that my like or dislike of an order hall says nothing about how much I like that class's gameplay or its lore. As I'm judging these, I'm primarily looking at two factors, aesthetics and layout. What that really breaks down to is a series of questions. Does it look good? Does it fit the class fantasy? And where are the areas that you use most often in relation to one another? As a side note, I'm also looking at whether or not you can mount, and whether or not you really need to. That's not to say I think we should be able to mount in every order hall, it's a matter of size and speed. If everything's close together, there's really no need to mount. I will not be discussing the order hall campaigns themselves, although followers will occasionally get a mention. There is no need to worry about major spoilers. With that out of the way, let's begin! Number 12. Mage, Hall of the Guardian. I'm gonna give it to you straight. I don't like this place. The biggest problem with this order hall is its layout. It's all spiral staircases inside a sweeping staircases, and it's hard to get around. But I'm gonna get back to that in a minute. I promise. Aesthetically, it just does not stand out. Yes, Dalaran was and is the obvious choice for a location for an order hall for mages, but that means it's just not going to stand out in an expansion where absolutely everyone is based in and out of Dalaran all the time. That said, the appeal of Dalaran itself is that it's bright and airy. This place is dim and kind of stuffy. And while there are a lot of nice little details don't fix systemic problems. Getting back to the layout issues as promised, there's that massive divider in the middle of the downstairs hallway. Normally that wouldn't be a total deal breaker, except for one problem. The troop recruiter for Tyrus Guard apprentices or Kirin Torin workers is on the opposite side of that divider from your mission map. Generally speaking, I think it should be easy to get in and out of your order hall. You should be able to stop by, switch over your missions, upgrade your artifact, and leave. The layout of the Hall of the Guardian unfortunately, it doesn't allow for a quick stop. If someone's waiting for you for a group, or if you just really want to get back to questing, you need to be able to get in and out pretty quickly, and this order hall just fails that test. One of the things I really do like about this order hall is that it's very refined. There's a library and a little art gallery. There are also a lot of nifty little magical instruments upstairs, and that's really cool. It's nice to have. The upstairs of this order hall is actually pretty nice. There are some really nice views from the upstairs gallery, and the upstairs is set up well. The problem with these nice views is that they are nicer from upstairs than they are from where they are actually overlooking downstairs. The downstairs is where this order hall fails. While I do like the enchanted library, I would have preferred something a little bit neater. I mean, they really just left a bunch of paper on the floor. I was hoping it was going to look a little bit more like the one in the Dalaran inscription shop. There's no doubt that this place is genuinely magical in appearance, and that is ideal for a mage. But nothing compensates for the massive failures of getting in and out of here. It's a problem. It really is a problem. And that's unfortunate. Number 11. Rogue, the Hall of Shadows. My reason for ranking this order hall so low on the list is mainly disappointment. I was hoping for a rebuilt Ravenholt or perhaps a little hidden cave near Booty Bay. Instead, we got more Dalaran. And everything I said about Dalaran not standing out in a Dalaran-centered expansion, it's just as true with the Hall of Shadows as it was for the Hall of the Guardian. This particular order hall has access to a lot more vendors than most, which is kind of interesting, except that a lot of them don't really sell things you need. There's also an extra black market auction house here, and while access to another black market auction house might be a nice feature for some, I don't personally know anyone who uses it so extensively on a rogue in particular that this is some kind of necessity. My other big issue with this order hall is that while it feels fine for subtlety and assassination rogues, it's an awkward fit at best for the newly rebranded outlaw rogues. If you look here, Fleet Admiral Tethys, he looks really out of place because of the use of the Dalaran tile set. We do get our own bard though. How neat is that? As I go through the little tavern area, I'd like to discuss the layout a little bit. While it certainly doesn't have the navigation issues of the Hall of the Guardian, the Hall of Shadows does have some issues in this regard. It's very crowded. While the bar is a nice touch, it's a very, very small order hall, and it benefits from not actually being able to mount. If you were able to mount in here, it would just be wall-to-wall mounts. And chances are that you wouldn't be able to get anything done because the map in the forge would be blocked. When I said I was looking at whether or not you can mount and whether or not you needed it, that is exactly what I meant. In this case, mounting would actually get in your way. It would actually detract from this order hall. So it's actually a good thing that you can't. There's some nice little detail here with the Forsaken Royal Apothecary Society, but as I said before, a lot of this order hall feels like it was designed based around assassination and subtlety rogues and not outlaw rogues. Overall, it's crowded, but not impossible to navigate. The recruiter for bandits or defies thieves is a little bit far from the recruiter from the Bloodsail Pirates or uncrowd duelists, but it's not a huge issue because it's small. The bigger issue is that it's designed based around only 2 out of 3 specs, and that's to the exclusion of the 3rd spec. There are only small nods to Outlaw spec, and considering that was the big deal that they totally changed combat into Outlaw, that's kind of disappointing. Oh, you can walk the plank though. You can totally do that. Number 10. Hunter, True Shot Lodge. Much like the Hall of Shadows, one problem with True Shot Lodge is that it is very small. Because it is partially outdoors, it does end up looking larger than it actually is, but it is, in fact, quite a small order hall. Troop recruitment is outside, with squads of archers or unseen marksmen near the targets in front of the building, and bands of trackers near the stable master. While I'm aware that most marksmanship hunters do run without a pet, having a stable master is very much a necessity for survival and beast mastery specs. Aesthetically, True Shot Lodge is very much a Night Elf compound, with a torn tower and a small Gilnean camp. While that is very much to be expected in the Broken Isles, it does not reflect the totality of the hunter class, which can be played by all races. I am, though, incredibly fond of the music in this particular order hall. I think it's shared with High Mountain as a whole, but that's not a bad thing. It's good music. It's lively, it's engaging. It's just kind of a pity that it was put in such a dull area as well. High Mountain as a whole is quite a nice zone. True Shot Lodge, not so much. My biggest issue with True Shot Lodge isn't the skew toward Night Elves, though. It's the use of space. It makes sense for a hunter lodge to include outdoor areas. However, the use of space is very awkward. While I'm aware that artifact research isn't such a big deal anymore, having it behind the building always felt like it didn't belong or didn't really fit. And yet, at the same time, there's a ton of unused space on one side of the building, and the map area inside the building is often crowded and feels cramped given the popularity of the class. Overall, in my honest opinion, True Shot Lodge looks a little bit dull. It certainly isn't the prettiest place in the world, and it doesn't really stand out among the places visited during the Legion expansion. And while it is nice to have most of the things that you use regularly in close proximity to one another, there is such a concept as having too small of a space and too much of a good thing. Looking back at the natural areas Azeroth already had to offer, such as Grizzly Hills or parts of Mount Hydra, and some of the locations where hunter-trainers can be found, particularly the Cenarian Enclave in Darnassus and Garstrider's Square in Silvermoon City, at other locations within High Mountain, such as the fields of Anshe and Pine Rock Basin, and looking over at the Dream Grove, True Shot Lodge just seems bleak by comparison. As I said though, the reason that True Shot Lodge ranked relatively low on my list is that there are large amounts of unused space and then a bunch of things crammed into a small space. I do love the hunting trophies inside the lodge proper, and it does have a wonderful view. I'm just sorry that I filmed at night, so you can't really see it that well. Number 9. Warlock, Dreadscar Rift. Dreadscar Rift is a functional order hall, with aesthetics that suit its class perfectly. So why isn't it at the top of the list? Simply put, wasted space. One detail I love about Dreadscar Rift is that each different type of demon has its own little space. There's an imp mother to spawn in your imp troops from her fell pit. There's a meat pit for your fellhounds, and there's another area for your void lords. It's almost like they tried to make the pet demons comfortable. Dreadscar Rift is basically 3 levels stacked up somewhat on top of one another along a twisting path. But you would be forgiven for mistakenly thinking that there were only 2 levels, because there's very little on the bottom level apart from a bed with a few succubi around it. Another issue I have with Dreadscar Rift is that some NPCs are a little bit difficult to find. The Quartermaster in particular completely blends into the area around her. She's in this central area, so let's play a little game of Where's Gigi? Yes, that's her name, Gigi. Good luck spotting her before I walk right up to her, unless you play a warlock and already know right where she's standing. Do you see her yet? 'Cause she's right there. See my point? Just a heads up, I'm about to discuss the Class Hall campaign a tiny bit. There aren't too many spoilers, I promise. Dreadscar Rift is an order hall that you have to fight to earn. It's not just a base of operations, it's not somewhere that you retreat to, or a place that was empty when you found it, or a place where they just hand you the keys and let you in. You have to earn control of this place, which makes it feel like you've put a lot more into it as a player than some of the other order halls. Oh, and it's nice to be saluted on the way up to the forge. And that forge itself? There's a demon heart on a chain. Warlocks have the coolest things. Overall, Dreadscar Rift is a pretty functional order hall, with an appearance that really suits its class, but it does have some wasted space at the bottom, and it can be so dark that some NPCs can be lost. It's not bad, not by a long shot, but it does have its issues, and there are definitely a few order halls that are a lot more impressive. Number 8. Priest, Netherlight Temple. Unlike many previous entries on this list, this order hall has a functional layout. Everything you're likely to need on a regular basis to get in and out quickly is right in the center. Unlike the Hall of Shadows, which seems to be designed primarily for assassination and subtlety rogues, with only small nods to outlaw monks, Shadow Priests are not excluded from Netherlight Temple. The concept is very much shadow to the left of me, wholly to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle of a disc. That said, the aesthetic is extremely Draenei, and one of the artifacts is also extremely Draenei. Yes, I know that the Draenei have a major story arc this expansion, and that they have strong lore connections to the Naru, and a priesthood that is very important within their society. However, Draenei do not define priests as a class, nor are they the most popular race for player priests. Many races within Warcraft lore have prominent priesthoods in their societies. Yes, the Draenei are one, but so are Night Elves. Night Elves have the priesthood of Elu very prominent within their society, yet we're looking at Netherlight Temple, not a larger temple of Elu, and my question is why? I understand why priests did not get a human-type cathedral. That was either going to go to the paladins or the priests. Paladins got it, so the priests had to find something else. Given the diverse priesthoods of Azeroth, that something else was almost certainly going to be heavily skewed toward a particular race, no matter which race was chosen. But I'm curious as to why Draenei in particular were chosen instead of, say, Night Elves. To me, Netherlight Temple looks like it shares art assets with the Auchindoun Dungeon and other Draenei areas from the Warlords of Draenor. I'm curious whether or not Netherlight Temple was mostly made out of existing art assets. They did, however, seemingly make a concerted effort to represent the other priesthoods among the NPCs, and to include some of the more rarely seen gear sets as well. For example, a set consisting of gear from Siege of Orgrimmar and Blackrock Foundry is seen on a lot of Draenei. Many humans and dwarves are wearing Tier 3, and there are trolls walking around in Loabinder robes. Sadly though, some of these looks cannot be replicated by players. In particular, some of the priestesses of the Loom are walking around with a crescent moon headpiece that is actually a leather item from Druid Tier 8, as are the robes worn by the Tauren Sun priests. The outfits on the NPC priest, though, they will make the transmog addicts among you jealous. Overall, Netherlight Temple is a functional order hall that balances the full spectrum of priest specs nicely in its design, and it does look good. But its looks are still skewed toward a particular race, and that race just so happens to be one of the two playable races that dominated the aesthetics of the previous expansion, something I'm sure some players are a little sick of looking at. It's definitely not terrible, but it's also far from jaw-dropping. Number 7. Death Knight, Acheris, the Ebon Hold. The original Acheris seems to be the prototype for all of the other Order Halls, a bit more so than Peak of Serenity, and far more so than Moonglade. And it really would have been a disservice to the class if another building had been chosen, or if Acheris had been revamped beyond recognition. The Order Hall largely retains its Wrath-era layout, with upgraded textures and a few new features, like the map table and the Soul Forge, to make it viable for Legion content. Downstairs, there's still a corner for each spec: Frost, Blood, and Unholy. And this level of familiarity is nice. As I said before, it would have been a mistake put Death Knights anywhere other than Acheris. Just feels like home. And that's really what an order hall should be. Home. As a side note, I have tried not to film too many spoilers for the Order Hall campaigns, but one glance at the class follower list spoils a lot in this case, and my followers just happened to be standing around my Order Hall and not out on missions while I filmed the tour. If you've played a Death Knight for a long time, or actually if you have quested through Dragon Blight, Ice Crown, or the revamped Plague Lands on any class, you are going to recognize some of the NPCs here. While I absolutely love the aesthetics of this place, and could not imagine any other home for the Death Knights as a class, I do take a major issue with the layout. Specifically, I take issue with the fact that troop recruitment for Ebon Knights, or Ebon Ravagers, is upstairs near the Soul Forge and Rune Forges, rather than downstairs near the map table and the Ghoul and Geist Recruiter, and that makes for an inconvenience that causes a major delay when trying to set up missions and leave. Aesthetically, though, it suits the class perfectly, just as it did during Wrath. It didn't need an overhaul, just a small upgrade, and I'm glad it stayed true to its original form. Another nice bit of detail is that the Soul Forge fits in wonderfully right between the two forges that were already there. As I said, it wasn't so much changed as it was just upgraded a little bit. And that's fine. That's what it needed. If I were judging the Order Halls based entirely on aesthetics, counting form over function, Acheris would definitely make my top 3. However, I cannot overlook the inconvenient location of one of the troop recruiters. Overall, Acheris benefited a lot from leaving well enough alone, and does not feel overcrowded or cluttered. Acheris suits its class very well. It's delightfully gloomy, as it should be. Number 6. Warrior, Skyhold. I hope you like rose gold and wine red. Me? I don't. And your opinion of the aesthetics of this order hall is really going to depend a lot on how much you like or dislike that particular color combination, as well as how much you like or dislike the knotwork art style that it shares with parts of the Stormheim questing zone, the Halls of Valor dungeon, and the Trial of Valor raid. The layout of Skyhold is one of the best. All of the weapon stuff is in one corner, and all of the mission stuff is in another corner. I have no complaints in that regard. You can use ground mounts to get quickly between the two, which makes it very easy to come here, do your business, and get back to whatever it was you were doing before. There's also a convenient transport system right in the middle that allows you to travel to any zone in the Broken Isles instantly and drops you in the major quest hub for that zone for free. You get the transport points automatically as you quest, unlike the Mage's Zone portals or the Hunter's Eagle Flight network, both of which cost Order Hall resources to select and come at the expense of another talent in the Order Hall tree, and also drop you in less logical locations. Why, yes, that is a Valkyr who exists solely to drop you off at Shalaran or Thunder Totem whenever you feel like it. Joking aside, I'm just not thrilled with where they've taken the class fantasy, and the appearance of the Order Hall is a manifestation of that. I know Warrior's always been bland compared to other classes, and I'm quite aware that a lot of major NPCs are either dead or are unavailable to be a part of the Order Hall for other plot-related or faction-related reasons. But that leaves the Order Hall absolutely dominated by an unplayable race. And the sudden change from Foot Soldier to Viking is a pretty big one to have to swallow. Skyhold is a perfectly functional Order Hall, and I'm sure that some people like the look, even though I personally do not. But it just doesn't feel like it belongs to the warriors that have been seen in the game up until this point, and that's a really big issue for me. Order Halls were announced as a sort of a home for the class as a whole, and Skyhold just does not feel like a home for the warriors. At least not the warriors we've had up until this point. And that's the main reason it ranks relatively low on this list, despite it being one of the most functional Order Halls in terms of layout. It's pretty epic, there's no questioning that. It's just whether you love or hate the change. Number 5. Demon Hunter, the Fellhammer. Before I really get started on the hall itself, I just wanted to say that I absolutely love this little glide down to the portal. I'm inclined to be a little more charitable toward the aesthetics of Order Halls that have more interesting entrances than, say, the predictable Mage Teleport or the very dull Priest Portal, because I consider the entrance to be a part of the Order Hall as a whole. Much like the Hall of the Guardian, the Fellhammer was not really destined to stand out against the rest of this expansion. Too much of the Broken Isles is covered in Legion Fell goop and Eridar ships for this place to really look different. But in this case, that's kind of alright. This is, after all, the new class. It's the big deal this expansion. So it's pretty much expected that their Order Hall would be more in line with the overall art style than, say, some of the others might. Also, unlike the Hall of the Guardian, the Fellhammer doesn't really suffer from particularly severe layout issues. Troop recruitment is close to the map and the quartermaster. The forge is all the way downstairs, but it doesn't significantly detract from everyday in-and-out business, and and you can get there pretty quickly using your glide ability. The space is completely used, so there really aren't any large, empty gaps making it look half-finished or half-full, like True Shot Lodge or Dreadscar Rift. Frankly, I was a little bit surprised that Demon Hunters didn't simply retake the Black Temple or something, but I realized that that would have been highly impractical in terms of size and layout. What makes a good raid wouldn't really make a very good order hole. One issue I've had with a few of the other order halls is a relative lack of familiar NPCs, or at least NPCs who would be familiar to someone who has only played World of Warcraft and hasn't played the RTS games or read every lore novel. In the case of the Fellhammer, it would actually be pretty justified, because there weren't a whole lot of named demon hunters already present in World of Warcraft prior to Legion, let alone named demon hunters who are still alive or are presumed alive. But most of the ones who weren't actually killed do show up here, which is a nice touch. Except Verona's Sindweller. For some reason, he's not here. But regardless, bonus points for having at least a few familiar faces here. Overall, I don't really have any major problem with the Fellhammer. It's functional and it looks pretty good, even if the appearance does blend in more with the overall look of Legion than some other order halls. It does suit Demon Hunters as a class very well. However, it's not the most awe-inspiring, jaw-dropping place on the map, and I saved the top few spots for places that I think stood out head and shoulders above the rest in terms of appearance. Number 4. Paladin, Sanctum of Light. This place is absolutely stunning. I said before that either paladins or priests would get a traditional chapel, not both, and that paladins were the ones who got the traditional chapel. This is it. The Sanctum of Light is a beautiful hall beneath Light's Hope Chapel in the Eastern Plaguelands. What more is there to say? It's gorgeous, and it perfectly encompasses the paladin as a class. A holy warrior, a knight in shining armor. There is a huge amount of lore in most of the order halls, but you really notice it here more than in some of the others. Even if you're not a major lore buff, you will almost certainly recognize at least some of the named NPCs walking around, and at least some of the names on the statues in the chapel proper. Tyrion Fordring, Lady Leodrin, Alexandros Mowbray, Uther the Lightbringer, Turalian. I wouldn't expect the average player to know all of the named characters here, or everything about any given one of them, but I would honestly be very surprised if someone who mains a paladin was somehow completely unfamiliar with all of them, as well as all of the lore surrounding Light's Hope Chapel itself. While humans and blood elves are the most popular races for player paladins by far, the Order Hall does a pretty good job of encompassing the diversity of the class as a whole. While there is no dwarf follower, there are dwarves among the statues in the chapel, and there are plenty of dwarf NPCs walking around. You also see Tauren, you also see Draenei. For a place with such very human architecture, it's not filled with wall-to-wall humans or humans and blood elves, which is more than can be said for some of the other classes' halls. So, this Order Hall ticks all of the boxes, right? It looks amazing, and it really suits its class. What more could you want? Well, not quite all of the boxes. You see, the reason that the Sanctum of Light does not take the top spot on this list is that it can be time-consuming to get in here, upgrade your artifact, change over your missions, and get on your way. For an Order Hall where you cannot mount, it's fairly long, with the map at one end and the forge at the other, and the troop recruiters, one of them in particular, are pretty far away from the map. Clearly some function was sacrificed for aesthetic reasons, and he could have just as easily stood directly across from the other troop recruiter, allowing paladins to get back to what they were doing out in the world that much more quickly. It does appear to be a deliberate design choice of aesthetics over function, rather than an oversight of wasted space or clumsy handling of mechanics. So it gets fewer points taken off for it than some of the others have, but it doesn't get off the hook entirely. That said, who actually wants to leave this place? It's beautiful. Number 3. Druid, the Dream Grove. First, I want to say that I absolutely love the immersion of traveling through the Emerald Dream to get to the Dream Grove. It is, by far, my favorite entrance to any Order Hall. And this place is absolutely stunning. If I were ranking the Order Halls based solely on the ones that I'd personally want to visit the most if they were real, the Dream Grove would definitely be the top of that list. There are a lot of hidden nooks and crannies to explore here, including a whole barrow den and several buildings, which is something that the other Order Halls don't really have. And this is a massive upgrade from the relatively basic, if scenic, village of Nighthaven in Moonglade, which, to be fair, Nighthaven would have made a decent Order Hall in its own right, if it wasn't also needed for a couple of holidays and the quest heading into Mount Hydra. One of the issues several people had with the Dream Grove was that earlier in the expansion, it was just too big. It has an unusual, though not dysfunctional layout, with the research and recruiters in one area, the forge in another, and the map board in another. It works, it's just not the most common arrangement. You can fly in the Dream Grove, and even early in the expansion, you could use ground mounts. Even then, it was huge. Just to give you some idea of how big it is. I cut this video a lot for time, but it took around twice as long to film my walkthrough of this place as the next largest Order Hall. And before Broken Isles Flying was released, that was more of an obstruction to coming in, doing what you needed to do, and getting back to business than it is now. In terms of the wilderness encampment aesthetic that you probably think of when you think of where an Order of Druids would probably set itself up, they absolutely nailed it. And the Dream Grove has, in my opinion, the nicest artifact forge of any Order Hall. Look at this little tree. Look at it. That said, it's very much a Night Elf settlement, which, I mean, it makes a bit of sense since it is in Val Shara, which is very much a Night Elf zone, and the Dream Grove is, essentially, concentrated essence of Val Shara. However, Night Elves are not the only druids in the game.
Shh. The baby boomkins are learning.
Okay, as I was saying, the Dream Grove is really dominated by Night Elves. And that's what keeps it off my top spot. I'm sorry to those of you who adore them, and it's not saying that I don't. But they're not the only druids in the game, even if they are the most popular race for player druids. If you look at the follower list, it's dominated by Night Elves. There's a single troll, a single tauren, and no worgen. Oh, but there is a fairy dragon. Overall, the Dream Grove is a beautiful order hall, probably the most beautiful of all of them. But it's just a little too focused on Night Elves, when it should be focused on the whole of the class fantasy, putting it solidly in the top 3, but not at number 1. Number 2. Monk, Temple of Five Dawns on the Wandering Isle. I was a little bit disappointed when I found out that monks were not going to be using the Peak of Serenity as their class hall. But it was a functional order hall in its own right before order halls really properly existed, and I was sad to see it go. I was also a bit skeptical when they said that the monks would have their order hall on the Wandering Isle. It was not one of my favorite starting areas, but the reasons for that are a matter for another list. As for the concerns I had, for one thing, my high-level monk is not a Pandaren, so it doesn't really have that coming home feel that it might for someone who mainly plays a Pandaren monk. My fears were assuaged when I saw that we would be working with Chen Stormstout, Taran Zhu, and Lore Walker Chubb, all of whom should be familiar NPCs for anyone who quested through Mists of Pandaria. Another reason for my skepticism was that monks aren't a very popular class. I had my doubts that monks were actually going to get a fair treatment compared to more popular classes when I heard that monks were getting their order hall in an existing location. That said, I actually really like how they handled it, both in terms of the story and the layout itself. Basically, the Legion invaded Pandaria and the Peak of Serenity took the brunt of an attack. The Wandering Isle happened to be traveling close by, and they could see that something was wrong, and they saved you, so you wake up in the village. It explains why the Peak of Serenity was not an option, why the Wandering Isle was chosen instead of somewhere on Pandaria itself, and how we even got here, and it does that without being needlessly complicated. The Wandering Isle is a quaint, pretty area. Prettier than most of mainland Pandaria. It's kind of a condensed version of the Jade Forest and the Valley of the Four Winds. For those of you who haven't rolled a monk, or don't have one at a high enough level to come here, yes, you can visit the rest of the island. Most of it, anyhow. The Wood of Staves is closed off, but the gates to the village are open. However, the actual order hall itself is limited to the Temple of Five Dawns in Mandori village. Because it's limited to the walled village area, the order hall itself isn't too large. In terms of layout, everything related to the artifact is up in the temple and the side courtyard, and everything related to follower missions is down in the village itself. The staircase between the two is rather long, but this keeps it from feeling cramped. While other order halls were purpose-built, even the two in open-world Legion zones, this one was adapted from an existing map, which makes it all the more impressive that it doesn't have significant layout issues stemming from it being adapted, and that it still looks really good even though it's effectively 2 expansions and 4 years older than the rest. The other thing worth mentioning is that, of every race and class combination in the game, monks in Pandaren are the most disproportionately associated, with over half of all Pandaren being monks and around 40% of all monks being Pandaren, even though most races can be monks, and Pandaren have 7 class options. If there was ever a case for an order hall being completely dominated by a particular race, it's this one. But it's actually less dominated by Pandaren than you might think. Yes, the strong race-class association means that both the former class area at Peak of Serenity and the current Order Hall are dominated by Pandaren architecture. However, only 4 of the 9 possible class followers are Pandaren, and 3 of those are major existing lore characters. Going back to Peak of Serenity, around half the masters you had to face in Training Quest were Pandaren and half weren't. That tradition continued here, and it both acknowledges that there's an extremely strong association between monks as a class and Pandaren as a race, and gently nudges you with a reminder that they're not the only monks. In my opinion, that's what puts it just above the Dream Grove. Even though it's a very Pandaren place and life goes on in the villages and fields beyond, the Order Hall itself feels like it belongs to all monks, not just Pandaren monks. Number 1. Shaman, the Maelstrom. No, the Maelstrom is not as pretty as Light's Hope, the Dream Grove, or the Wandering Isle, and it wouldn't suit shamans as a class if it was. It's a perfect example of a zone that looks really good, without really being pretty in the conventional sense. It's something else entirely. It's raw and powerful and primal. It hangs over an abyss at the edge of the world, or rather, at the center of it. Even the music is dark and growling and booming, just like the constant storms. This isn't a place of quiet meditation or study, quite the opposite. And that's why it has such an impact. This Order Hall does look bigger than its regularly used portion is, and it's very linear. There are a couple of quests that go to the far ends of it, but for the most part, when you're going about your day-to-day business of upgrading your artifact and sending out your follower missions, you're in a relatively small area in the middle, allowing you to get in and out quickly without feeling cramped, but also allowing the rest of it to be used as needed. Unlike Trueshot Lodge or Dreadscar Rift, where there's just empty space. About the only complaint that I have is that one of the troop recruiters is a little farther out than some, but you can use ground mounts here, and the location is justified for another reason. Much like how Dreadscar Rift has places for all of the different kinds of demons that warlocks can summon, the Maelstrom has areas dedicated to different elements, and to the different types of elementals. The area you'll probably notice the most is the fire area, because it's very close to the portal to and from Dalaran, and it's the closest to the mission map and class hall upgrades. But earth, water, and air all have their places as well. It also has a very interesting artifact forge. Unlike the Blooming Tree in the Dream Grove, though, this one is interesting not because of what it does, but where it is. You're hanging out over the whirlpool that drops into Deepholm. There's lightning crashing and winds howling around you. The salt spray from the sea below lashes up the rocks and onto your face. Personally, I find this Order Hall the most immersive, and the Forge is the perfect reason why. It just screams shaman. It may be but a slab of rock on a precipice, but that's the beauty of it. It doesn't need to be fancy, it doesn't need to be pretty. And it's nothing if not primal. The Maelstrom. The heart of Azeroth. It's perfect. To note some of the places where the Maelstrom succeeds where others failed or floundered, I'm going to say that yes, the follower list is dominated by an unplayable race of sorts. 4 of your followers are elementals, which is completely justified because the elements are obviously the core of the shaman class fantasy, far more so than, say, fairy dragons and druids. I was also very happy to see that Alliance Shamans were not totally excluded, even though the class historically has strong connections to the Horde. The Maelstrom is also not full of completely obscure or new NPCs. If you quested through Cataclysm, you'll recognize Nobundo and Merla, and of course Thrall and Agra. I'm also going to note that this is the sort of thing I really wanted for Warriors as well. A place that looks good and feels powerful, but isn't too pretty. And that is why the Maelstrom, the heart of Azeroth, in many ways the simplest, most basic order hall, takes my top spot. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. See ya!